Basically, non-chill filtered is a statement where you're saying to people that you didn't do something. So what happens is in whiskey, there's natural, what are called long-chained fatty acid esters. They're just components that are found naturally within whiskey, and they're perfectly fine. They're just in all whiskeys when your whiskey's first made. But if you bottle your whiskey at, say, 40% or 80 proof without removing them, what might happen is if you're drinking in a very cold area, or if you're adding a lot of ice to your whiskey, those acids, or esters rather, will come out of solution and show up in your whiskey via looking like a kind of a cloudy haze in your whiskey. But once your whiskey warms up again, they dissolve back into your whiskey and aren't seen. So they're perfectly fine. But for anyone who doesn't know about them, they might think that there's a quality issue with the whiskey if they're adding ice or drinking it somewhere cold, that this cloudiness was showing up in their whiskey. They might think there's something wrong with it. So what happens among most whiskeys when they're being bottled at 40% is you would filter the whiskey to remove those fatty acid esters, and that's by chill filtering. So what you're essentially doing is you take your whiskey out of the barrels, you add your water to bring it to 40%, and you chill it down to about 1 degree Celsius. And what you're doing is you're trying to expose those fatty acid esters in the whiskey from that cloudiness. And then you filter that whiskey through this, what's called a plate and frame filter. So it's a long set of these frames holding what are like cellulose material. Some distilleries use, like, for example, crushed seashells as the material. So what you do is if you've chilled your whiskey to expose the esters, and then you push the whiskey under pressure through all those frames, the whiskey has to fight and meander its way through all those miniature cracks and crevices, and those fatty esters get left behind in the frame. So now what you've done is you've chilled and you've filtered your whiskey. But what you find is if you actually bottle your whiskey at a higher strength, like 43%, 46%, or cask strength, that's usually enough alcohol in your whiskey to offset that haze from forming in the first place. The idea then of bottling whiskey at a higher strength and then highlighting that it's non-chill filtered is kind of to consumers who might be in the know about these things, is to say, look here, we didn't do that process. And that's where it's a statement of saying what we didn't do. So interestingly enough, though, you'll find that, I suppose, in Midleton, because we triple distill, it's not typical, or it's typical to find that you won't have that fatty acid esterification showing up even at 40%. For example, like, we don't mention it on the label, but green spot would be one example where it's non-chill filtered and it's at 40%. And I think Powers 3 Swallow would be another example where I don't think we chill filter it either at 40%. It doesn't really remove flavor, for anyone who says they believe it does. And I'm only speaking for myself. I've been to distilleries in Scotland where we did like mini whiskey academies and things. And I remember being tested one time where they gave us samples in blue glass and they said, can you pick out a difference between these two or these three? And I couldn't. I thought I was missing something and other people couldn't. And one person said, oh, it tastes or it smells different. And the test was that it's the same whiskey. One was chill filtered and one wasn't, but the same brand, the same age, nothing else done to it. So I'd be very remiss to think that chill filtering would strip flavor. People might think of like maybe a touch of viscosity or something, but it would be on such a minute level. It doesn't really make a difference to me personally, but maybe it does for other people.
That's a great description. And it's a question that comes up often. So I think we'll have to chop up this video into that answer and share this every time somebody asks about chill filtering.